Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of y'all, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. And you can see how long this is already, so I'm going to go ahead and get right to it because there's no way to make this any shorter. So Clarence Jr. decided to reply to me and to Edward Anderson and to BJ Zipmore. And because my classes are over and a lot of my extracurricular work is done for now, I wound up having time to record this and to reply. All right, Clarence, the first point you contested was when I said that men aren't responsible for knowing game until women outright tell boys and young men what the hell they want and men don't have to figure it out. You asserted that I and men like me don't know its definition because I stated that game implies deception by the very word. If you don't define game as deception or manipulation, then fine. I mean, I understand that women want charming men and will have preferences for certain personalities over others like we're going to have for women. Still, boys aren't lying about what they want in classrooms and on TV and misleading their sisters about how to get guys. Except maybe lying to oversimplify things to where their sisters and female cousins and even daughters and nieces later on when these guys are men will have their guards up too high. That's the only lying, if you want to call it that goes on. They're overcautioned. Mind you, I'm saying this as a dad of daughters myself. I'm not going to sit up and tell my daughters, well, you know, guys only want one thing and every guy's the same. I'm going to tell them, look, you have to understand that the ones that will pursue you at some point are going to go after that. They may do it in the context of a marriage, or they do it in the context of fornication. I'll tell them that. But I'm not going to sit up and tell them to so-called guard their chastity from their husbands. Now, when men know what women want without deception from their own female relatives at least, then we can put the blame on men if they refuse to be what Western sisters want and then complain about not attracting women. But frankly, right now, we've been lied to. And our dead mothers, those of our mothers that have passed away, usually wouldn't tell us all the games. This is a new phenomenon. And even when they could articulate them, the worst luck that some men had in that regard is when their own moms would prime them to fall for these games. See, you wanted to use Angry Man at the end to try to tell us why game is important. You can't use Angry Man to tell me that. I don't hate him. But look, Angry Man said that guys without game and swag are supposed to be the dishwashers. See, you didn't say that we so-called squares have to be the stepdads to other men's babies, but he did say this. He said we have to be the cleanup men because of our inability to read women's minds. So you use what he said as if to correct me? Nah, bruh. I'm all for wisdom in addition to knowledge. I'm all for that. I'm all for social fluidity, and I'm all for that stuff. The lack of social awkwardness. But these arguments that you guys are bringing up are things that largely hold true for young men. As we get older and we learn, see, those of us that keep trying eventually have to shed the things that don't work. Now, what happens when you shed these things, but then you're still treated like less than by the same demographic of women because of the other women they cannot smell on you? Eventually, it comes down to nothing but that. See, some men were so unlucky that their own moms would prime them to fall for these games. And when Angry Man said that the society would teach the men to be exactly what women can't respond to, what is the society? Maybe, does it include pimps? Not so much, no. The society, he said, would socialize and train and condition us to be socially awkward. That means it's women doing this. And for the most unlucky of men, it was their own mothers included. It still goes back to them. And the women that will lie to their male relatives would have a lot of help from older male relatives too. Maybe simp behind uncles, simp dads. And it's not because all of the men are simps, but it's because Western black mothers and aunts and grandmoms and older sisters would refuse to let men who know women well enough and are honest about it tell their sons and nephews anything, even if that man was dad or uncle. You learn game, they're going to try to stop you. Your own female relatives will try to stop you from telling young boys what that game really is. And I mean, if you really learn game as in what women truly want. The games they'll play. You learn that game, and they're going to try to stop you from teaching that to the young boys. That's how it was, and it's how it's been. It's just now beginning to change. Now, if my own daughters made me a granddad, they may try to stop me from telling their sons about the games women play if they listen to their peers in popular media enough. Maybe I'm training them to where they wouldn't be these types of moms. My son will not try to deceive his sisters or daughters, neither my daughters nor my granddaughters, about men so that the men can take advantage of them unfairly. He will not do that to them. There's not a question of it. My daughters are too young to tell. See, a former imam told me 2 mornings ago that frankly he doesn't want a potential son-in-law to tell him that he wouldn't even hit his own daughter in self-defense. He looked me in his camera, which is the same as looking me in my eye, and told me that he wouldn't allow his daughter to hit his son-in-law any more than he'd be okay with his son-in-law hitting his daughter, and that hitting the other gender first is the offense. Now, what this man is saying is, ain't no simping. Don't even simp for my daughter. Treat her fairly. Be responsible to her. Do that, yes, but do not oppress my daughter, and don't let her oppress you. He's fair to his own daughter and potential son-in-law, at least so far, whereas most moms would leave their sons clueless. That's the real society, sir. Training and conditioning and teaching and socializing boys to be exactly what women aren't looking for. Many dads will do the same because they're clueless, despite the fact that cluelessness lessens dad's chances of being the real biological dad. Consider that too. You seem very unaware of the depths and lengths to which they'll go to deceive us. Next, you contested my point that men are only responsible for being too easy on a collective basis. You said we never had an answer when you ask what we're doing wrong, and it's always the women. You ask, how convenient is that? Sir, when you're not the deceiver and you're just being too easy because you were taught nothing else at first off rip, and you're getting it ignored for it if you're lucky and punished for it when your luck is at its worst, then the truth is actually convenient as it should be. When you ain't guilty, in the end, the truth becomes convenient. On the days of judgment, the truth is convenient for the innocent. Being innocent is very convenient when it's time to assign blame, unless the blame is assigned by the guilty or the guilty's sympathizers who think the guilty are innocent. This is coming from a man who believes that innocent women do exist, but they're not the ones you're defending. Ironically, you're exonerating the masculine niches. They're rough and hypercritical Western hyena B words that not only push us away, but blame us for the results they bring about in their pushing away of us and lying and deception to us. You agreed with my point that 80% of the men only want 20% of the, 80% of the women want 20% of the men. Actually, it's more like 18% of the men that are wanted organically, and even less on dating apps, with 18% being the liberal estimate. I was rounding up. You said only 20% of the men know how to lead and provide and qualify. Sir, it's only 20% they want. Not how many of us qualify according to what they say, which is ironically what they're now phasing out of telling us they want. They're phasing out of the previous lies and phasing into the brazen and nasty truth. I want a drug dealer scammer done. You hear them saying these things. Talking about something we don't know how to lead and we don't want to. I thought the same thing until I left the United States. Westernisha can't be led, sir. Keisha can't be coached. She knows what the wrong situations are in which to be, and that's exactly what she wants to be, so she can call you to be an attack dog and say that you're not protecting her if you don't do that. That's what it comes down to. And though not all of them are like that, the worst ones that will do that are the ones that are hyper available, because they don't mind having 2 or 3 or 4 attack dogs. The ones that are willing to be led got one man. So most of us won't find them. As I stated, we're now in a time when these ladies are saying more to us honestly about the negativity that they want. They want scammers. They want felons, or maybe just F-boys, according to their own words on street interviews. In the words of the deceased Mr. Samuels, I can't make that up. See, I admitted that most men don't know what women want and understand women. Yeah, well, that means that we don't know. So our errors are honest errors and honest mistakes. Women are driving men away, which means they're using their understanding of us to repel us, but try to keep us in their back pockets for when they need something non-sexual. We are not the same. The guys who do understand women are a minority, and there is a cycle that the women control. These guys are allowed by women to learn about women, and as they learn more, the next women respect them more for knowing what sisters hide from us as a gender. That's a cycle, and we obviously don't control that. That's completely in the women's control. Because if we control it, we'd all know what we need to know from jump, and we will plan our lives accordingly. You later ask why a childless man who was done with those women would worry about it. Again, I'm a dad, and all of my kids were born before my current wife. I don't mean they were born before my wife was born. I mean they were born before I met her. The thing is, I don't want the boys of today to go through the same she-devils as they grow into men that we already experienced. See, I don't just say that my son should not have to experience it. I believe that neither my son nor yours nor either of our grandsons should have to experience them. We came up in a time when these women had it made. You and I did. Especially me, because I came up at least a decade before you did. Their plan was to go through a mandatory 304 phase, settle for the guy that didn't really want to screw to get a commitment and resources for their kids. And then get a retirement funded by these same dudes, either in a marriage in which they could cheat or after a divorce if they were lucky enough. Because one thing they were going to do was pick the ones that could afford to provide for them where they didn't have to work. So that these guys would be stuck because they knew the system. They knew this in high school and we didn't. But definitely getting at least a supplemental income from them, even if it's just non-sexual favors from friends in the friend zone. I want that retirement dried up. I want the guys that Angry Man said should be dishwashers or cleanup men to no longer be in existence, no longer be clueless. See, we males always have to face consequences, even from you, even when we didn't do wrong, even when we made honest mistakes after being deceived and lied to by intentional liars, which is why you hear me refusing any more accountability for us men beyond that of being too easy. I did say we're accountable, but it is for being too easy. Now, that's one thing for which I never forgave men, period, and will not. It's time the funny thing is this, when I say that that's the only accountability, you and others say you refuse to hold men accountable because, see, that's because you want to gloss over the fact that for which I'm holding us accountable is the root of any other faults we might have. That was a flaw, and it is the flaw from which all other flaws spring and branch off. It's time the ladies had to face the consequences of their own choices, and not just for my sense of vengeance, but for the sake of justice itself. And this means they don't get to rely on men whom they knowingly denied what we want to get all the things they want and need in life, except sex, because we might enjoy that too much. And only the bad boys deserve that in their minds. If you don't hold men accountable for being stepdaddies, and you said you don't, then I stand corrected, and I accept that assertion from you. We're not. Certainly not by default, and not when we're childless. However, the sisters you're exonerating will demand this of us. They do demand this of us. The same men, most of them don't want, and none of them want when they're in shape and young. You're still holding these men, us men, accountable for something into which most men are deceived through no fault of our own before we even men. Women not wanting us isn't because of our failures, but because of their dishonesty. Hell, Angry Man did at least as much say that we were trained to be what they don't want. So as young boys, we were lied to by TV partially, but also by girls and women around us. And if the women in our lives were simply silent, that's bad enough. And I do blame traditional women for that. They're silent. They don't necessarily go around lying to men about what they want and don't want. They're just silent about it. They leave it a mystery. I blame them for that much. But at least they don't go blaming men for not knowing and not reading their mind. Whereas you start to and you know what? I consider the possibility that even the Western women that were silent had a lack of vocabulary and language to explain it all. Just to be fair, I consider that possibility. Maybe that's what it is. But still, that left nothing but the TV to inform young boys about what to expect from women later in life. Well, here's the deal. A lot of aunts, cousins, sisters, grandmoms, and even moms knew the lies on TV in the West and how to correct them, and they still remained silent, or they lied again. Now, in less westernized parts of our home continent, women may not want most men they see, and that's fine, but they don't blame the men for not being it either. They're not walking around trying to embarrass and blame the same men they shut out of experience for not being experienced. You know, in the West, the Keisha that needs a little coaching has the nerve to try to belittle inexperienced men, or even men she assumes are inexperienced based on how they look. Thing is, it's not like she's offering classes on how to be an expert bedroom wrestler, which she doesn't have to, and which I wouldn't recommend anyway. I'm not telling these women to go through these 3 or 4 phases. But what I am saying is that when they choose the men they want, they're just going to have to communicate and teach these men just like the men are going to have to teach them. And we don't have a situation like that. We got a situation in which the women ain't willing to teach the men, but they're all more experienced than most of the men. And only men that are more experienced than them, that they can respect for sexual reasons, got too many options. And they were willing to take those options, which is how they got as experienced as they did, to where the women will respect them enough to want a commitment from them and even honor it if they could get it. The irony of it. All because of what she wants, none of this because of what men want, let alone demand. However, you see, that Western Isha is trying to blame men for being normal, which is the crux of this mess that goes on between women and men in our communities. Now, you did say something with which I agree. There's something to debate, but there's no net reason to debate it. We disagree polarly on why, though. You say you're right and I'm wrong. I say I'm right and you're wrong. Well, BGS and Edward Anderson, being twice your age and your age, say what I say. Here's the crux of why they say it. Men who fail with Keisha, the Western sister, don't fail across the board with women. I myself lived in the U.S. until 8 years ago. I was married in the USA and dated as a non-Muslim before that. The worst things I did in either talking to non-black women or striking out with them were based on things I learned from one of the 2 most toxic types of women in America. The Western black woman, Keisha. That's one of the 2 most toxic. I didn't give Karen, Becky, and Amber a shot, so you probably won't blame me for that. But you exonerate Keisha, Boom Shika, and Bonquisha, and Sophista Ratchet Sapphire. You said he just needed a little coaching. Well, she's seen a black man conquered and impoverished, I get it. But so has a Southeast Asian woman seen her man conquered and impoverished. So has the Native American woman seen her man conquered and impoverished. So has the other Native American woman. We call them Latin Americans or the mestizas. And so have other black women from the continent and from Latin America too. They don't hate them men and they don't disrespect them as a category either. Now, there are some Mexican women that like the cholos only. Nothing but the gangsters, and wouldn't be caught dead with a non-cholo. And I don't know what terms they use for the regular ones that aren't cholo, be they Mexicans in Mexico or Chicanos in the USA. I just know that there's a subculture of this mess in Mexico and its diaspora in America. So I won't say it's exclusive to Keisha, but I won't exonerate the mayonnaise mafiosas or the Mexicans for their hybristophilia either. They're just less hybristophilic than Keisha is. A guy with a tattoo, a motorcycle, and maybe a misdemeanor for tagging something can impress her as long as he doesn't lose a fight in front of her. A shine has to be on his way to being buried alive in a cell block or buried dead in a cemetery to qualify for Keisha. I know firsthand that many sisters who don't want specifically these things in a man are still shamed by the sisterhood if they choose a guy that isn't on these paths and he's black. So while I acknowledge the existence of these women, that's a point on which we agree. What's lost by many of us, and you don't mention, is that they're silenced and socially can get away with choosing a Wyatt more easily than they could get away with choosing one of us shines that's not idness. Because that same sisterhood that tells us to stay chasing Keisha tells its own to choose the idness from amongst us or get an L7 from amongst the Wyatts. Now, where does that leave us majority black men that are NS, non-stereotypical, and we're not Wyatt and don't want to be? Well, traditional non-Western women, be they black or not, aren't insisting on us choosing between being idness or being Wyatt to get with them. They're choosing us in larger numbers. And the ones who don't choose us still don't shame the ones of their own kind that do. So you say y'all ain't getting nobody. Bro, the ones that live outside the West usually are. There are more SYSBM men still living in the West, which is how they came to the awareness of SYSBM. We're still in that phase, so it's not their fault that they're not. They're still stuck in the West. So understand this. Maybe Chinese and Korean women do shame other women from their backgrounds that choose to shine. But Japanese women don't shame their colleagues who do. Southeast Asian women seem to congratulate their own who choose one of us. And even Arab women leave it to the individual and her male relatives to choose or not choose to shine. Persian, Indian, and Pakistani women will participate in shaming others of their ladies who choose one of us. Bengali women don't. What ends up happening is that these shines, whom Keisha calls lame for not being able to read women's minds, and whom you blame for not having game, aren't meeting the same walls with these other women. At least when a woman of these backgrounds is uninterested in a particular one amongst us, it's personal, and she doesn't think it's disgusting that another woman would like us. Keisha has attitude for days about that. That's why they say stuff like, who let you have kids? How many of us have heard a woman say this to another man, a sister, a Keisha? I used to hear it fairly frequently in jokes and in serious comments directed at guys, once even at me, that they knew from their past. I stopped hearing it when I left the US until I posted a pic of my daughters, and one lady who had a crush on me in our teens said the same thing to me. And she used to somewhat like me. I just said that. Imagine that. Ironically, when some sisters did like me but changed their minds later, it would be because of things I'd learned from other sisters that I didn't know would not apply between us, because there's no way I could have known. I knew about boundaries since before I can remember. The thing is, I was taught harsher lessons about boundaries than other black men were. We were boys, back before we were even men. The thing is, when a woman likes you, they hate that you respect these same boundaries. But how are you supposed to read their minds and know this? We can't. And then they're free to change their minds about that, but they have nothing for which to blame us when we can't read their minds. And this is one form of them moving the goalposts. And frankly, that's enough of a reason by itself to not try to game sisters up. Now, this leads to my next point about game. I admit, I didn't know your specific definition of game until the end of your recording when you said it. So I had to be careful before that about what assumptions I would make about how you understand it. But game is still a nebulous term in general. You have your definition. You stated it. Others got other definitions. Charm is a nebulous term. Game is even more nebulous than charm. And that's how it winds up implying deception and manipulation to the masses, even if that's not what you mean. So really, its definition varies from one to the next, either gender, but women agree as to which men have it. Now, these women won't all agree to what it means, but they agree as to which men have it. So what it comes down to is, you're attracted to women in general, you got game. Okay, all right. But since women ain't about to sit up and come up with a common definition that's concrete, then we men aren't required to understand it or learn it, because there's nothing defined for us to learn. I'm not saying this. I'm not saying that there's something wrong with a man attaining your definition of game. I just wouldn't call it game. I'm talking about as women understand it and define it. Any need or want a woman can't articulate clearly in her first language is not a man's responsibility to meet. That goes both ways, but men usually won't hold women accountable for not being able to meet a need or want he can't articulate to her in his or her first language. We know that sounds stupid. Any brother in any barbershop that knows of such a situation will immediately blame the man that does it for that. What sister in a hair salon will blame another sister for the same requirement they levy on us as a routine? Well, none. My own mother answered that question 2 decades ago for me. They know they better not tell a sister she messed up in doing that, because when these young toxic hyena B-words brag about doing far worse to really good men, they're ready to shave bald or slash any sister who might try to talk some sense into them. So imagine telling these same ones to not blame men for not being psychic and calling it weak game. They'll probably slit a throat. Until game has a clear definition that states otherwise, it sounds to men who have to be men of substance like ninja babble, as Edward Anderson would call it, and what I call jigabosity. It sounds like porch monkeyism that some idiots came up with to avoid having to confront in words the reasons why black families can't form enough or stay together enough. Honestly, sir, however clear your definition is, others, meaning Keisha and the ones whom she chases or who chase her, would change it again if guys who wear glasses, read well, and don't meet stereotypes learned what game was and showed it. Outside of your definition, they wouldn't call it game anymore. I mean, the sisters, and sympathizers wouldn't call it game anymore. It's like a skill that's valuable and must be compensated highly. If enough black men learn it, people will simply pay less for it and won't pay any more than that. Now, this mechanism in the minds of people is subconscious. A lot of people don't realize that they would do that. If every black man learns how to take care of cars, the only way that white mechanics could charge the same is if they keep better tools and parts to themselves, because the skill itself and the labor would be valued less. And most consumers who would pay differently based on this don't even realize they would do it, black or white. Well, it's the same with game, whatever it is. Now that I know your definition of game, knowing yourself, loving yourself, and believing in yourself, understand that your definition is exactly why men should not approach or validate these typical Western women, because these are the same women that demand equality in everything in word, but in practice they demand privilege and priority and benefits and to be spared from any kind of problems. Plus, that definition of game you have is exactly what these women are lacking even more. And not only that, they're socially awkward with men they like. We've all stood up and watched these women when they notice a man before he notices her, and they try to get his attention, but they're just so awkward and doing it. They don't know what to do. Don't say nothing about men in game we don't have. These women ain't got it. They get confidence, they get arrogant. They admit a flaw, that self-esteem is gone, and then they start projecting these things onto us. See, men with game, according to your definition of game, are the first ones who would understand that only traditional women should even be approached, let alone offered what you said later in your recording that women want from men. These women in the West are cocky, but they're not confident. They're arrogant, but with a fragile and shallow self-esteem, and they overly love themselves, but in the wrong ways, and they don't really know themselves, and they don't believe in themselves either. So they combine the worst of various personality types, some of which should be mutually exclusive, yet they throw these in together in themselves and offer this to us. They don't even offer it. They want us to pursue that. Now, if we have to have game, as you defined it, then why should we match ourselves to, let alone pursue, the type of woman who has the worst game in the world? That's really selling ourselves short, especially once we have game as you define it. Now, I stand corrected in remembering you being up there for 6 hours. That's my bad memory. That's on me. Charge it to my head and not my heart. I was still right about you not learning, though. Again, our indoctrination is right. If sisters don't want the majority of black men, that's not necessarily anyone's fault, but it is their fault when they complain about the outcomes of their choices to chase the same few men and want the guys they didn't pick to take on the responsibilities of their choices. You don't hold men accountable and responsible to pay for the choices of other men. That's commendable on your part. You stated it. I accept that from you. So I tip my hat where that's concerned. That's fair. However, you got to understand that it is the ladies that are complaining about the outcomes of these choices that they make after they insist on chasing the same few men. See, a lot of women don't want a lot of men. That's fine. But in traditional societies, a woman's allowed to make her own choice, or she and her dad are allowed to make her own choice in a traditional society. So let's take, for instance, here where I live, the women don't look at a guy and say, well, he's lame because other women don't want him. A woman that wants a particular guy is allowed to marry him. These women don't shame her for that. And anyway, now that I'm done with that, that actually brings me to my next point. I individually give sisters in America every chance. I gave them every chance, except the chance to use and disrespect me. And some of them would creatively come up with ways to do these things anyway. Now, why is that? Why would they insist on doing what I did not give them chances to do? It's because, frankly, sir, we have to deal with the shallowness and the hive mind of the Western system, which also exists amongst the Western wired woman. I dealt with sisters to the extent they chose, sir. So I did give them a chance. The terms they had were pretty disrespectful to any man. So I have the right to say what I said and still say about white black men in general, Western not, and even Southeast Asian men, since they're actually pretty nice and fair people, shouldn't have to deal with Western black women, let alone approach, validate, and protect them. I saw the men whom these sisters didn't give the same headaches to. And even when these guys weren't straight up street, the things sisters would tolerate from them were the exact same things they'd find wrong with either me or my close friends for associating with me. Now you're going to sit up and say, okay, now black mind, you got to look at you and what it was about you that made sisters treat you differently, worse than how they treated other black men. And I did this for years. And guess what wound up happening? And I was the guy on whom they would have secret crushes. I know how these sisters are lying about their standards anyway. Now, as for me, You said something about, why would I, if I don't deal with them and I'm by myself and single, why would I even wear it? Well, I'm actually married to an African woman. Now, if you want me to show her, no. I'm not showing myself and I'm not showing her. I'm not going to compromise my privacy, let alone hers. So instead of taking my word for it, there's some subscribers who know me in person and they know I'm married to her, so they may chime in the comments or they may not. But there are those who do know that I'm married and they know to whom I'm married and where she's from. They've heard her speak her own language to her people. But getting back to the point that I wanted to make, you asked why we would even be concerned about this dynamic, which I answered. Now, my question is, why does it matter to you if we stay put or abandon Keisha en masse? If you're Keisha's type, because you're confident, you got game, you got swag, and you're a leader, and I mean you're in generally her type, then what is our effort and our presence to get her attention and validation do for you? I know the answer, but I'm asking. Do the efforts of non-select guys make your job easier somehow? I think that it does if I didn't know any better, but the truth is that, see, women of that environment in which you live have to turn down men to have the confidence to pursue the guys they even want, or even to say yes to the guys they want. This means they got to turn down many guys before they say yes to you or me. And if you have enough game to understand women's game, then you do know this, and you just didn't tell this to the rest of us. So what you're really saying is, y'all need to keep on trying, because you know what? You keep on trying, then when I come with the game, she'll feel better about saying yeah to me. Plus, maybe she's getting something out of you guys in the friend zone, and I don't have to supply these things. I've already stated this before, and I admit that you may have never heard that recording because it was years ago, but I did state that once you tell us to keep on trying with the same woman that gives us the worst time, it's because you're looking for us to pay so that you can play. You're not only looking to play, but you're looking for us to do the paying and not play so that you can play and not pay. You're suggesting that we blame ourselves, try more with Keisha, refuse to try with other women on the basis that we're inherently flawed and that Keisha's normal in her selection of men, and then increase the chances that Keisha will feel comfortable saying yes to your game because she perceives more options to disregard the same substance she will later blame us for you not having, if you have all this game. You'd like a situation in which when you come bringing game, you don't have to have as much substance. We're saying to leave her alone because we understand that the epitome of game is the Western woman's acting like they want. Well, actually, it's the Western woman's acting like they don't need men and they don't want men, so that we try to appeal to them to just want us as if they don't naturally want men. Pretty much, they've tricked us into trying to convince them as if they're asexual to be the heterosexuals they are, naturally. And you want to sit up and tell us that we need to learn game. Well, your definition is reasonable for something that we would need to learn. But the thing is, you got to realize that she's the one that can. See, just like we've been socialized as men to be socially awkward around women, but we outgrow that. The women are socialized to not recognize positive traits in men they don't want. They don't like how he looks. They can't recognize positive traits. What you use to define game are positive traits. They're not going to recognize them as positive if they don't smell enough other B words on us. That's what it comes down to. Now, you want to say that, guys that have women don't take, they're not in 6-hour streams. Maybe, maybe not. It depends. I mean, BGS is single, but he's old enough to justify that. Nobody can sit up and say that he's 9AY. I'm not. For me to record this, to be honest with you, it's actually, me recording this, I have to admit, it's because I finished classes. I didn't expect to have this much time. Normally I gotta teach classes, run errands. I still got some repairs to make to where we live, but I just happen to have time now. And that's why I can sit up here and go for the hour that I think this is going to take, even though I'm not trying to go an hour. Honestly, we're in a stage in which there are more SYSBM men in the USA than outside the West, as I mentioned. So there will be men who know that SYSBM is right, but they're not out yet. Those who are usually engaged or married, as far as I know. I'm not saying that there's a study to give you the stats and the numbers on it. So I'm being honest about what I've observed in that regard, that the ones I know that are out of the West are about to be married or they're married. Actually, SYSBM is pro-marriage. We're even fine with marrying black women. We're just not going to limit ourselves to the worst of them. And we will go to the continent, but we're going to avoid nations in which, let's say, they're religiously incompatible with us for the most part. And we're going to avoid cities in which they've been heavily westernized and feminized, like Lagos, Joburg, Cape Town, Pretoria, and Nairobi. This doesn't change the fact that these men are right in their awareness of there being a problem. The same sense of morality and righteousness and responsibility that is in men that is a minus to Western women because it's corny, are plus signs to non-Western and traditional women. And so you missed the point that I was making about that guy. There was a nuclear physicist for the Navy. The point I was making is that the woman sat up and said, he has no personality. I'm really good at reading people. No, she doesn't know about his personality yet, and she's not that good at reading people. She didn't have to want him. She just needed to be honest about what it is she didn't want. That's not something she could know that early. I just wanted her to be honest about it. She doesn't have to like him, but when you get guys that are like this in a self-discipline, what really happens is a lot of times the women say, dang, I'm outclassed. And I find him corny for that reason. So you know what? I can't show him off to my ratchet friends. They're not chasing him down, so, And I'm outclassed, so he's going to demand self-discipline from me, or just he's going to be the source of whichever one. You know what? I'm going to come with something else and put it back on him. No, it's more like I'm probably not as disciplined as you. So my analogy of the Western woman to a broken vending machine is still valid, unless it is better for me to compare her and analogize her to an unfair snack store owner. Now, my more experienced subscribers will tell you that in that comparison to the snack store or the candy store owner, the owner lets a charming or just intimidating kid get the best candy for less than its sticker price, and even less than what it cost the store owner to buy it. And then instead of absorbing the cost, the owner turns and passes the loss on to the other customers who are willing to pay fair price for what they buy. So these other customers go to the shelves, get the best candy that's left, bring that to the counter, and not only are they told at the counter that the sticker price for that was wrong, but that the correct price is more than the sticker price for the best snacks that are no longer on the shelves. And expecting these customers to know not that they're paying for the candy that the other kids got cheaply, or even just by entertaining the store owner. So if my comparison between Keisha and the vending machine is wrong, then my comparison between Keisha and the snack store or candy store owner is flawless. Either way, sir, these are the most fair-minded. Those who are the most fair-minded are asked to pay more for less so that someone else the store owner wants to impress can get more for less. You can't expect those paying more for less to blame themselves for the choice of the store owner to price discriminate. They can only blame themselves if they keep subjecting themselves to it. And well, I'm saying that we're not going to do that. And there's one other thing we'd be able to blame ourselves for: being quiet and not telling others that we know are getting the same bad deal what we know about the bad deal they're getting. Staying silent, not letting others know about it, is something for which we could blame ourselves. So we're telling them in the hopes that they will eventually boycott that store altogether, and they'll even tell others who are in the majority what they know about why the best snacks are always sold out and the sticker prices for what's left are updated at the counter to be more than the sticker prices for what's gone. Flushed down the toilet by someone that didn't pay and simply entertained, which is exactly what a store owner would tell you, whom are exactly the store owners would tell you they will not give anything for free. Now this leads to my next point, sir. You ask when men will blame ourselves for what women are not only choosing, but lying about wanting and not wanting. And I said, not until we men have all the necessary information and the same options as women. You ask why that's important too. Like, why worry about if a man has the same opportunities as a woman? Sir, the reason is because, frankly, the women will go through 3 or 4 phases that men can't go through and still demand that the men they choose have more experience than them to respect these men. They can't respect a man who's less sexually experienced than themselves, but they're going to get more sexual experience than most men by a wide margin. So now that means that the men who form the carousel they rode are the only ones they can respect, but those men are busy forming the carousel that they were riding, and so therefore they're not about to commit. So these women would know they can get a Johnson more easily than most dudes can get our Johnsons and some guts. But then they'll lose respect for the men who are normal and therefore have less experience than them, and will resent those guys as though they're less than average, but they're in fact normal. And they'll blame these guys for the commitment and resources they couldn't get from the guys who have higher body counts than women, because they all want these guys. So women have the same sexual double standards for which they blame men, but they have it to a higher degree than men. And this is shown in some studies. I admit I can't find those links anymore, but I remember the conclusions. Most men ain't looking for women to be virgins or even limit themselves to 3 partners, even when it comes to marriage. But women don't want to be with a man that's less experienced than they are, and they'll settle for these men for resources and provision and stability. Clarence, when I said that it's not men's fault until we have the same options as women and the same knowledge of women they have of men, you answered by saying that it is also our fault. How is it someone's fault for not knowing the exact same secret that is being kept from them by all and sundry? In this case, it's not even a secret, but secrets with an S at the end. Now, we know that women want to be taken care of and protected, but let's be honest. They spent decades lying about that too in the feminist movement, bragging about having what they actually wanted from men, while saying that they didn't need these things from men because they already had it. They lied to my age group of men. My age group is different from yours, and they lied to us before we even got to puberty by looking at provisions that men had that they wanted, and then telling these same men on TV and in real life that these men couldn't buy these women. I don't need your money, I got my own. You can't buy me, I'm my own person. Now, we could see through that by age 15 in general. We still didn't walk away from them for lying about that. But the lies didn't even stop there. You said women want men, and that leads to my next point. They do want men as they understand manhood. We agree on that. But they have 2 different standards for manhood when they're dealing with even different races of men. Hell, even when they're dealing with different complexions of men within the same race. I know about that firsthand. Shine has to be so macho he's on his way to the penitentiary or the graveyard. Brad gets to be regular and not even be that protective or have that much provision. Alexis Ohanian, anyone? You know, Serena Williams' husband. We see it more each day. Whether a woman is part of a divesting group or whether she just happens to get with a Brad, which means she jumped over every other race of men. Whatever the case is, we see they don't even have to be that protective. I could see it through social media, an ocean and a continent away, but I waited until I saw it in 2019 and then again in 2021 myself with my own eyes visiting the US before agreeing that it must be true. Western white and black women alike are assessing manhood based on stereotypes. The exception is when a sister assesses a Brad as a man. They don't demand that he be idness by any standards. Hell, even the white women are usually looking at the brother and assuming that he's somewhat idness and saying he's a man, which is why he doesn't have to be as idness as he's got to be for a sapphire. But the point I'm making is you keep blaming men for not understanding women. You said in your own words, women are very simple to understand if you care to take the time to get an understanding. Clarence, I'm not SYSBM because I don't understand women personally. I'm not SYSBM even though I understand women personally. I'm SYSBM and against black men, Western or not, growing into those men that will pursue Western women of any race, specifically because I'm SYSBM, specifically because I understand them. But that understanding took decades for me because I had to sort through a bunch of lies that not only dudes told, but even women themselves told. And I came to understand that even traditional women were silent on what they wanted. And I don't forgive them for that. However, I hold it in their favor that they're the ones that don't blame men for not understanding them. Western women outright lied, deceived even their own male relatives about it, sometimes their own sons, just so that men would not understand them, keeping themselves a secret, and then convincing guys like you to blame us, men, for not understanding what they were keeping a secret or lying about from jump. It would be like me blaming you for not knowing KGB and Kremlin secrets when you as an American citizen aren't even allowed to know the FBI and CIA secrets. See, the thing is, the very confidence you say they can't find in us non-select guys is the same thing they call arrogance when they see it in a man. That nuclear physicist for the Navy was confident. He believed in himself. I'm sure he loved himself, but he didn't have a personality. In the end, it comes down to the fact that he wasn't street stereotypical enough. Now, maybe a guy doesn't have to be street stereotypical, but then he's got to be an NBA player or an NFL player. Men have to be afraid of him. That's what they're looking for. They're also looking for us to take care of them, but they're looking for us, and I don't blame them for that, as long as they're honest about it. And you don't blame them for that. Even if they're not honest about it, we are not the same. See, what I know is that while they lie about it, they're still looking for us to take care of them in specifically the same context we would have told them to avoid, and would work hard so that they don't even need proximity to these contexts. We'd be willing to work hard so as to keep them away from the same context in which they demand that we come flying in like Superman to protect them as an attack dog. Now, if women don't believe in us, that's fine, and maybe that's true, and they don't. I believe you when you say that they don't believe in us, but I'm telling you, after being married to two non-Western sisters, and that's after marrying and dating Western sisters before that, Western women are the up ones. They're trained not to recognize confidence or competence in non-stereotypical black men. The white ones are trained to not recognize these things in run-of-the-mill milquetoast white men. They don't believe in us, sir, because they can't, because you want to talk about angry man telling us how men have been socialized and trained and conditioned. That's true. The women didn't even outgrow their socialization and training and conditioning to not believe in men that ain't street. Hell, sisters couldn't even recognize confidence in me without seeing it as arrogance just based on my phenotype. And that's what some of them told me eventually themselves, so I couldn't make that up either. For other black men, it could be things like prescription glasses, bilingualism, anything else not negatively, stereotypically attributed to black men that caused them to be assumed to be arrogant or lacking in self-confidence altogether. Anything that was wrong, but never that balance in between. When a Western man is up towards women, or even just confused to the extent that he's useless to women in general, believe me, that's going to come from a pattern present in Western women. Not one Western woman, but a pattern present in Western women. In traditional societies where they're silent about what they want, since they don't blame men for not knowing these things, the men don't necessarily come out as being broken, untrained, or ill-trained, confused, and useless to women in general. No, that's a Western Negro thing. And to a certain extent, this affects the Western whites too. Now, my Moroccan ex-wife never blamed me for not knowing something without her telling me. My current wife doesn't blame me for things I just don't know. If she's in a bad mood for something else, she doesn't come take it out on me if I didn't cause it. You think I got that from Western sisters? Man, if you want to tell me off about whom I didn't even give a chance, like I said, that would be the Western wild woman. I gave sisters a chance, and I can tell you, with most Western sisters, if they were not even that attractive, they could be upset about something else, turn around, take it out on me, and then turn around with the next boyfriend if he was more recognizably black than me, visually speaking. They wouldn't do this unless, of course, there was something else to offset the stereotypes. Like I said, he was bilingual, or he wore prescription glasses. So from Western sisters, it was par for the course to be blamed for things unconnected to me that still made them angry. And it didn't always have to be in a relationship either. It could be just, that's a classmate. Or just, we know each other. Believe me, the contempt they had was palpable. And I saw it in them towards a few other guys, like I said, that just weren't stereotypical. And even I was neither an L7 nor a street dude. I was in the middle, but standing up for myself wasn't enough when I was challenged. I had to fight and win against other black males and find out accidentally that that was what sisters were waiting for me to do. And other guys with just a bit more melanin and muscle didn't have to fight like I did. All they had to do was just verbally set boundaries. What do they have in common? They were stereotypically, they were convincingly stereotypical enough just at first glance. That's all it took. It was the negative stereotypes, really. This is how black women judge how well they're going to treat black men. Negative stereotypes, the enemies. And later, when I was 24, a colleague of mine at work broke that down to me. She broke down a lot of it. And I remembered it all again in 2017, almost 5 years ago. In 2 months, it'll be 5 years. When a man tried to hook me up with 2 American women and a Bahamian, and the Bahamian reminded me too much of my American ex, so that was out the picture. And as far as the Americans, the pattern was just like I remembered. The one that was plain was ready. She looked at my photo and was like, good Lord, does he know he's handsome? And the cute one asked the guy to try to introduce us if I was even black, and why did he send her my photos off rip? And when he told her, yeah, he is black, he's just light skinned, she was like, he ain't black, and don't even try to introduce us. Never mind. She later tried to get married to somebody, and that man just said, no, I'm out. Another Muslim man tried to marry her later, and then he broke off the engagement. But see, that same pattern was exactly what it was like when I lived in the USA. And that's what jarred my memory of what the lady from 2001 said when I was 24. And what it came down to was this: as an ambiguous looking black man, I wasn't what sisters didn't want. Some did, some didn't. But I was exactly with whom they didn't want to be seen in public, which is why married and seriously involved women would consider me as a side dude. I shouldn't even say consider. They'd proposition me to be a side dude. I wasn't into that. But single women would get offended if they were cute and someone tried to hook us up. Now, how come the married women and the involved women could be nice to look at and in shape, but the single women, if they were just kind of cute, they would get offended if someone tried to hook us up? That's because they didn't want to publicly be with a racially ambiguous looking man back then. Now they're divesting straight to the Wyatts. And you want to sit up and say, Keisha just needs a little coaching. No, bro, this is a collective thing, and it's hypocrisy. They're allowed their preference, but they're just changing them almost as if just to keep blaming men and to keep men in a situation for which you will blame the men. Now, if it was nothing other than me just being somewhat ambiguous looking, then let's be honest. How you think they're going to be treating other men? Now that more and more black men don't want to be stereotypes, and sisters insist on that, what you think they're going to do with these men? You think they're going to sit up and say, if you're black, you need to be a stereotype? Somehow, even if you ain't that street, even if you ain't got felonies, you need to be something that other men fear, not respect, but fear. That's what they're saying. And now that a lot of brothers don't want to be that anymore, especially just for some old funky axe wound, well, guess what? A lot of sisters are mad. And they got you sitting up holding us accountable. See, the African American woman taught me to respect boundaries the way that I do. And that's a lot more than what even other gentlemen do, because I was taught harsher lessons by the same women. So when women look them in their eyes, this guy might think, okay, she wants a kiss. And when a woman looks me in my eyes for too long, I got to calculate if she means, and I'm talking about a Western sister. If a Western sister looks me in my eyes for too long, I got to calculate, is she waiting for a kiss, or does she mean something aggressive by it? Because I was threatened and attacked by women I didn't offend up until age 26. It's what I went through. Other men went through similar things. I never moved in. I never said, oh, okay, she wants me to kiss her and I'm moving for a kiss and she slaps me. I didn't even have that kind of trauma. I was more careful than that. The point is, later on, some of these same women go complain to somebody else about what I didn't understand. And you expect me to believe that I missed opportunities? No, they were complaining because what they were looking for was for me to misunderstand it so that they could complain. He didn't understand when I was looking at him that I wanted to kiss him. Okay, well, if I'd moved in, then they would have, maybe some would have actually slapped me. Others would have been like, what gave you that idea? Then they would go and complain to other women. What gave him that idea? Because then they can brag about how they turned the guy down. Either way it goes, they get to brag. And you're falling for it, Clarence. Yeah, he need to learn. No, I don't need to learn a mother cuss word thing, and neither does any other black man. Except the ones that women were honest with from jump. And I don't know those brothers. Even the ones that know game had to figure it out. So even other black men that weren't necessarily threatened or attacked as easily as I was, though they could get it. But you're expecting me and other guys who've been through something similar to see things from an optimistic lens you have. But my audience and I are the guys who've been shown and to whom sisters proved that we would be fools for that same optimism. If you're succeeding with these women, well, we're failing. Great. But don't expect us to have the same optimism, because it's not about what we didn't learn or about what we don't know. It's about, well, maybe it is, but it's about what they didn't teach us. And even if we were to assume these things, they would see that as arrogance. In all honesty, I'm going to go ahead and say it. Since you said you weren't going to pull any punches and hold any hands. If you're succeeding with Western sisters, most Western sisters, then chances are you're doing something wrong as far as people in general are concerned. Either you are dysfunctional or you appeal as though you are dysfunctional without actually being dysfunctional, and they fall for it. It took me decades in living in 2 continents to understand women, and frankly, I know some things you don't know, just like you know some things I don't. But I know why they don't deserve you or me in the West where you live, and my understanding of them is why I'm SYSBM. So if you're never going to live abroad, even part-time, that's okay, just admit it. But don't expect me to disregard what I know from not only visiting abroad, but living abroad. And also remember that it's specifically feminists who want men to have no choice one day, even outside the West. And that's why they're spreading their not only feminism, but misandry to women in environments that don't teach this misandry internally. Ironically, it's not even Keisha, but Becky and Karen and Amber that are more active in this effort to spread it. But they use Keisha, Bonquisha, Boom Shika, and Sophista Ratchet Sapphire as models to show, as caricatures. And they got women in traditional environments, but urban environments beginning to fall for it. Major urban centers in traditional countries. That's what they target. And these women are beginning to fall for that. So Boom Chic and Bonquisha and Sophista Ratchet Sapphire, Keisha, who you say needs coaching, are still unintentionally aiding in that effort. But it's because the Western women know, whether they're white or black, they do know that these traditional women are their competition. So they're teaching them to simply not compete, while you're telling us men to compete for not only women, but for the same women who despise most of men. They tell, or that they used to tell us to be, and we've since become. The ones that the guys they told us to be and whom we become are the ones they despise the most. And you're telling us to go and chase behind and compete for those kinds of women, the ones that told the most lies. Keep in mind that Kevin Samuels said that when men did what he said and they climbed up or moved up, they had a hard time finding black Western women that would not undo the results of their hard work and self-improvement. He didn't let men off the hook. I do, because being younger than him, I know how toxic my age group is compared to even their older sisters. So his age group might have been less toxic, but mine was, they terrible, man. And don't get me started on the ones in your age group. Hell, they're so toxic, they've got you desensitized. And I've witnessed this myself. And frankly, sir, having experienced really good treatment outside of the West, I want this for you gentlemen too. You're just one that not only doesn't want it for himself, but doesn't even want it for others either. The real question isn't me. It's not about me or my audience members. When we're going to hold ourselves accountable, when we're going to attribute it to ourselves not knowing game. That's not the question. It's why you don't want this good treatment for yourself and for other men when not one of those Western sisters will excuse you from earning that good treatment, but will try to shame any woman that gives you that good treatment. You must earn it, but damn whoever gives it to you. That's her mindset. Why are you telling us to stay with that? What were you taught about yourself that made you decide to accept that earning it was incumbent upon you, but it was incumbent upon her to deny you the same thing you must earn? What made you decide to hold yourself accountable to learn something so nebulous as the exact same game that we've yet to see sisters agree to define collectively, and they insist on not teaching you? Because be honest, you have a definition for game, and the elements in that definition are positive traits, but it wasn't no sister that taught you that. And if they did, they lied to you about what they wanted, because they don't know these same things in me and other NS men. And hell, you ain't a street dude. So honestly, man, the times you fail are going to have something to do with that as well. You can look at other things about yourself that may cause women to overlook you. That's fine. But we're not going to ignore that. Eventually, there may come a day in which we have to blame all women around the world, like you said we're going to do eventually. Well, if all women accept misandry, feminism, and the Western woman's paradigm, your mother cuss word right, we're going to wind up blaming all of them. If they all accept the Western woman's teachings. Because once they do, they'll all demand game, swag, and then they'll blame the guys without game and swag for the commitments they couldn't get from the few guys they all chased because they had game and swag. And they'll all be chasing the same few guys that just assume that they're lying about what they want, because those are the guys that start off lucky with women. They just assume that these women ain't fit and that they're lying, and women gravitate to them and respect them. Just like Western women, if these traditional women start to be like them, then they'll agree with you in saying that the majority of us just couldn't attract women, when the reality will be that they will have been assimilated into a hive mind. It still won't be black men's fault, and yet there will be just more women falsely blaming us and agreeing with you. So that being said, we're right back where we started. It's not black men's fault. Do we do things that women might find cringe? I'm sure we do. But then again, they find everything cringe. And it does say something, though you don't want to admit this, you want to address it, but then tell others to overlook it. It does say something when black men who are about some things and don't fit negative stereotypes wind up succeeding with non-Western women. And it does say something about Western black women if these same black men have any, even if they just have a better illusion of success with Western wired women. Although I maintain that they're not to be trusted either. It still says a whole lot bad about Keisha. I know that not every sister wants that the tattoos and the felonies and the thugs and the serial baby mamas. I know they don't all want that. Thing is, they're not enough to go around. The men that are not like the stereotypes still far outweigh the women that will openly admit that that's not what they're looking for anyway. You got a lot of sisters that are pressured into going for only those dudes and don't want them. I don't know how many they are, because they're not going to all speak up. But we're dealing with a dysfunction that is so toxic, it seems to have you completely desensitized. Now I know what Jennifer Lewis said. I know what she meant when she said that refrain. If you sit in it long enough, it stops stinking. If you can get out of that cesspool, man, and live in a traditional environment, a traditional nation, then you'll see it. If you cannot, I'm not blaming you if you just don't have that option. Not everyone can. But what I do want you to at least do is admit that those of us that have experience with other cultures, traditional cultures, non-Western cultures, know something about this. Just admit that. Yes, it is up to them if we're compatible with them or not. We're not sitting up here pushing them away. If you don't believe me, and you know what, I know you will not. But if you don't believe me, then try joining the Peace Corps unless you're already making a lot more money than what they make. Try that. And if you're making a lot more than what they make, then go ahead and try to take a leave of absence or a vacation somewhere in a traditional environment. Try that. I guarantee, man, you'll see something different. Matter of fact, I'll say go ahead and try it now before they do dry up. And then maybe a decade later, when you're able to save up enough again to spend enough time in the same environment, go back and see. And then you'll see what I'm talking about. I hope this helps. If not you, I hope it helps someone else that listen. And thank you all for listening. Black Heart, Black Mind, Blackout, Assalamu Alaikum. Black heterosexual, non-select, no game having male power because they don't like it. And it ain't your fault most of the time. And Black Patriarch until extinction or judgment day.